Hey, Discern listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, let's watch.
A caller, and he can be our ring bearer. I'm Ed, also known as Big Ed, and I'm a very young 56.
I'm Liz. I'm 29 years old.
I thought you were 49.
Okay, so Ed and Liz are back. I know that a lot of people are criticizing them being on the show because Ed has a history of potentially being abusive. There was that one phone call where there are alleged abuses from him verbally and seemingly maybe a pattern in their relationship. There's also the criticism that they're two Americans that are in a relationship, so why are they on 90 Day Fiancé? To me, though, I am fascinated with their relationship, and I'm worried that this season they're not going to really get into it, but I'm not fascinated in like a positive way. It's not negative, but I think they have a very complicated relationship that lends itself to my kind of commentary. I'm going to try to remember what I was starting to hypothesize about them in the past. I mean, we saw them at the tell-all where they had, I think that was the last time we had seen them, right? And they had broken up. And then by the end of the tell-all, they were starting to maybe reconcile, which looked very concerning to a lot of people. Ed had talked about how he had broken up with her a lot, but he had been in a lot of therapy and was really working on things. And a lot of people criticized Liz, why are you with him, da-da-da. So it's hard to know what's going on, but I hope that they will give us some material, some material to work with in terms of trying to figure out what's going on. I do think that they're good people that are trying to work things out. They have issues that are probably related to their past, and so I don't think that they're evil or that they wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to present a picture that's going to purposely annoy other people. I think there are two people trying to get their needs met. They're trying to find love and companionship and stability, acceptance, self-esteem in their way.
You look so cute. Liz and I have been engaged for 4 months. It was on again, off again for about a year and a half prior to that. But now we're engaged for real.
Okay, so this must have been filmed a long time ago, maybe even as far back as the tell-all that we saw. A year and a half is what he's saying, and now they're engaged. Okay.
Brunch?
Brunch, I love it.
Brunch, okay.
Okay. There are a lot of things that I was working through when we were together. I was insecure, jealous, and it started to affect our ability to be in a functional relationship.
That's great. So who knows how much work he's done in this area, but there's a lot of evidence of that. In that phone conversation, allegedly, he was jealous and verbally abusing her for driving one of her coworkers home, even though she had asked him prior to doing so if it was okay, and he said it was okay. Then afterwards, he was on the phone with her and berating her, verbally abusing her. It was a pretty awful phone call. I did an episode on that. It's on my channel. You can probably just search Ed phone or something. So we heard what sounded like he had been triggered to feel abandonment and betrayal, and was hurt and scared of losing Liz. And instead of communicating those feelings or coping with them somehow, he went on the offensive. He abused her as a way of trying to control her so that she would no longer give signs of abandonment or no longer make him feel scared of losing her. And it's this paradox, right? Or ironic that as you misinterpret something like that, she just drove a guy home, big deal. And it signals, oh, she's going to leave me, and I desperately don't want her to leave me, so I'm going to verbally attack her, which is going to cause her to want to leave me, right? And so this is the common insecure attachment reactivity coping that a lot of people will engage in that will, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So it did look that way, that he did have that reactivity, and he's now saying I had issues of jealousy, and well, let's rewind that.
There are a lot of things that I was working through when we were together. I was insecure, jealous, and it started to affect our ability to be in a functional relationship.
I was insecure and I was getting jealous. He is not saying you made me jealous, and that's the problem. He's saying I was insecure. He's in therapy, and at the tell-all, he'd said he'd been in therapy for months, which is, I think, a first, or at least one of the firsts for this show, where someone doesn't just go to one session. Ed didn't even record it, right? So maybe it's legit therapy and he's seemingly going, and it wouldn't be hard for a therapist to see that jealousy and to help him differentiate or heal or something. That's a good sign that could result in them having at least a non-abusive relationship and maybe even a functional one. And another thing is that he would often break up with her. So how do we reconcile those two things of him being desperate and insecure and jealous, but then he would be the one to break up? And my hypothesis, and I think he said he broke up with her like 10 times, is that she would just be living her life and would trigger his insecurities, his relational traumas. He would transform that into anger. He would attack her. And then at a certain point, he would say, this is overwhelming to me. I can't deal with this. I'm done with you. Or maybe even breaking up with her as an act of abuse, of saying, I'm going to break up with you because I hope that you will come back around and beg me to re-engage with you, and you will learn never to do that again because of how severely I reacted against you. It's a common preoccupied, well, it could be a preoccupied, disorganized, or avoidant behavior. It's more indicative of preoccupied, but it could be really any of the insecure attachment coping styles. So I think that's what was happening. I don't know, obviously, but the core of it would be his relational traumas, his jealousy, his insecurity. Not to shame himself for that, but to be able to have some self-awareness about it. I don't know, but it's possible. It's not likely that whatever relational traumas he's had, he's healed from by this point. But at the first stage of therapy, in the initial phases, you can, at least this is my model, is that you can work on self-awareness through interpretation, emotional regulation. And in the beginning, it wouldn't be unusual for someone like Ed in the situation to say, okay, this thing happened. I'm having this impulse. Normally, I would just go down this road of anger. I would feel completely righteous, and I would attack, and then everything would go out of control, that I would break up, and then I'd want them back, and then we'd get back together. But this time, I'm going to see the trail before me, the old trail that I keep going down over and over and over again, and say, I'm not going to go down this trail. So I'm going to stop where I am and pick a different route. Where else can I go here? Maybe if I do nothing, maybe I just take a break from the relationship. Don't break up, don't engage, but just do something else for a few days. Or what if I say how I feel? Or what if I even just look at myself and say, I think I'm feeling that jealous feeling, but really, and that anger and that urge to attack, but really what's happening for me is I feel insecure and I'm sad and I'm worried. And so maybe if I just have some self-compassion around that feeling, maybe talk to a friend, oh, she drove this guy home and I don't know, he's probably more attractive than I am and she's young and attractive. And so, maybe she'll leave me, and, you process those feelings, you get through it, you don't transfer it into anger, and you go down a different route. You still have that reactivity every time you get triggered, but you have other options because you're cognizant of what's happening to you. You're not just automatically falling into a trap of your old tapes.
And I'm like, here we go again. I like somebody and it's gonna fail.
There's nothing between us.
Okay, hold on one second. Then I saw you guys walk into your car one night.
I'm not gonna stop hanging out, like having my own life and being independent.
So eventually, our fighting became too much.
So it's interesting that they show that scene where he's mildly pressuring her to not hang out with her friends, seemingly, and then she asserts herself, rather than showing the phone call, which was way beyond what that scene was.
So I decided to end it once and for all. I basically broke up with her 8 times via text. They were always text.
As the texter.
Right?
Yeah, they're both crying about those events. She is hurt, and I think he feels bad about that hurt that he inflicted on her. And so maybe they're seemingly still recovering from that. Maybe he has apologized sufficiently. I don't know.
It's a lot of breakups.
So what's going to make it different this time?
Good question. Most of it was my issues. So I felt I had to grow in order to be with her. And I realized she was what I wanted. And I knew I could handle it. I knew I was ready.
Okay,
it's hard to know what that means. I'm not encouraged by that. I mean, he said most of it was my fault and my issues, so that's encouraging. But then he says, but then I realized she is what I want and she is, worth it, that kind of thing. Hard to know what that means.
I love Ed because, yes, we had a really rough patch for a while, but Ed has shown me love in ways that I've never had with any previous relationship. He shows his love for me too with the love that he has for my daughter. And I think that was the biggest thing that made me fall in love with Ed.
Okay. I think a lot of people are confused as to why she would be with him. She's saying, though, that he loves her in a way that she's never experienced before, and that he seemingly is a good stepdad. And her kid, they don't talk about that very often. I think I forgot. In fact, I know I forgot that she has a child, and I'm glad that they don't include her on the show. I've stated my opinion that the children should never be on these shows. They cannot provide informed, mature consent. Even as teenagers, I don't think they really know what they're getting into. So I'm glad that they're not on the show. But anyway, I think that there's signs, or maybe she even said this explicitly, that her past relationships were tumultuous, maybe abusive, harmful to her in some way. And was she married twice before? But she appreciates the way he loves her. And we could imagine that being true. Well, I don't know if you can, but I can. I can imagine that for Ed, when he is calm and not triggered, that he can be very sweet and nice and caring, attentive in his way. So I could see that being appealing to someone.
So on my side, the announcement of our engagement didn't quite go as expected. I really don't know. My daughter, she was naturally shocked and upset.
She called everybody before I had an opportunity
to call people,
to tell my brothers, to tell my mom and my buddy Rich, my ex-buddy Rich.
Am I getting this right? And then they're on Dating Life last season, and they get engaged, and to tell all of that was when his friend told the mom and the daughter they were engaged. And am I remembering that right? I seem to remember something like that.
Conversation I'm getting ready to have with Rich. I'm like, look, I thought you were my friend. After Liz and I got back together, a lot of my friends and family didn't understand why. When we first broke up, Liz said a lot of, bad things about me. And I think they're afraid that she's going to do that again.
Yeah, this is a common problem in families and in friend circles, that you might have a friend, or you might be that friend, who has a relationship that has a lot of visible problems that concern other people, and that when you decide to re-engage or stay in the relationship, there's a lot of anger, hurt feelings, rejection, that kind of thing. And I think there's legit reason sometimes to distance yourself from someone that is in an abusive relationship. But I don't know, from the surface, or what we've seen in recent seasons between the two, post that phone call, I don't know if there's a lot of reason for Ed's family and friends to completely reject him. If I were his family member, I think I would say, well, it's not likely to work out, but I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. I hope it works out. And because the thing that I will say, and for Ed, I think it might even be true, that given his relational traumas and other kinds of issues, this might be his version of an early 20s relationship. And that's one thing to think about sometimes, is that just because you are a certain age doesn't mean you're that age in every realm. You might, at the age of 25, be like a 35-year-old when it comes to careers, because you started working when you were 13 and really got the ball rolling early. Or you could be 25 and have the mindset of a 15-year-old because you've never worked much and you didn't have a life that lend itself to that. Well, you can have a similar thing when it comes to dating and your own emotional awareness, your own recovery from relational traumas. You could be 50-something, but have the maturity and the approach or the reactivity of someone in their early 20s when it comes, or even in their teens when it comes to companionship and romantic relationships. So it's possible that for him, that's what's going on. And the other element to this is that we all, I almost kind of hope that we've all been through tumultuous relationships. I, of course, don't wish tumult and conflict and strife and drama for people's lives. But I've contended, I remember this was one of the first kind of psychological principles before I even knew I wanted to become a therapist that I had pontificated, which is that you don't really know who you are, or you're not a real adult until you've had your heart broken by a tumultuous relationship. That when we go through that, we change for the better. And until you go through that, you don't really know who you are, and you really haven't learned. It's sort of like every kid has to go to preschool or kindergarten and be separated from their parents temporarily. We all have to go through these developmental phases, right? The first time you went to work and had a boss that was not happy with you. The first time that you, I don't know, just those kinds of firsts. And I think that before, there's a you before and a you after. And I think there is a version of us before having gone through that. Now, I'm not saying that you're not a real person. I wouldn't say that today. I used to say that when I was, 18, but because certainly there are aromantic people who never engage in relationships, and doesn't mean that they're not a full adult yet, is my point. But when it comes to relationships, if there's a progression, and I think we can all kind of point to that. So when I have a friend or a family member who is going through something like their relationship, I will frame it sometimes as, well, they're learning. They're learning who they are. They're learning what kind of relationships they want to have. They're learning their own relationship, and they have to go through that. You can't tell your friends and family to not do it. It's like if you have a kid, you have an 18-year-old that's going through a very difficult, dramatic relationship. Now, if it's traumatizing to your kid or abusive to your kid, that's a different category. But if it's not that, then you kind of want them to go through that. You can't protect people from the reality of themselves and life for the rest of their life, because you learn a lot as you go through that experience. It's hard. It's not easy. It can be very painful, and you don't want it to be overly painful and traumatic, but it's not pleasant. And I think all of us benefited from that. We had to go through that. So you could say, in one way of speaking, and so we could say for the two of them, that maybe this is that relationship for them, that they have to go through this. Now, they might end up staying together through it all, but they're still learning. They're still figuring out who they are. And to say, I don't want you to be in the relationship might merely be postponing the inevitable, that they have to go through this before they can really learn who they are. And it might as well be in now. No better time than the present for them to experience this kind of relationship and grow from that. It's not a scientific perspective. It's just a philosophy, I suppose, but that's how I would see it. And it releases this necessity of pressure and judgment from the outside. I feel like a lot of people feel, when they see this, they feel compelled to stop it, to be like, I'm not going to support this relationship. I'm going to judge you and yell at you for being in this relationship because I feel like I'm trying to protect you from that. Now, there's another category where you have a friend who is being abused and they've been gaslit and maybe throughout their life, and they don't value themselves. And in those situations, it's different, right? Because they can't flexibly and healthily move through that situation because they're in a system that is beating them down. So that's different. And I suppose if you saw it that way, then you would be justified in being more pointed in your criticism. But I don't know. What do you think?
I've tried to reach out to my daughter, Tiffany, and at this moment, she's not taking my calls. And Rich is somebody that I've known for 15 years. And after we got engaged, he said a lot of bad things. And I want to know why he can't accept the fact that I've chosen Liz.
Now, I want to say, I feel like I don't have to say this, but I will sometimes get reactions from people indicating that I guess I had to say this, which is, I'm not saying I support the relationship. I'm not saying I'm not supportive of the relationship. I'm a therapist. I'm a couples therapist, and we don't make those kinds of calls. We don't make those kinds of decisions. If this was not psychology in Seattle and it was just some dude in Seattle commenting, I might say something different. But as a professional, and really as a human being, because a lot of my professional perspectives have become my perspectives because I strive in my professional life to have an accurate, helpful way of seeing the world, and my citizen self has adopted that as well. But I mean, not entirely. If this were just some dude in Seattle, then I would be saying different things in all likelihood. You know, when tonight I'm watching this right now, it's on Sunday. Stacy will watch this at some point, and when we confer about what happened, or sometimes I'll watch it earlier in the day, and then later in the night she'll be watching it, and I'll rewatch it with her, and I say different things. But sometimes I say very similar things, I'm guessing. Anyway, point is that I'm not saying I'm supportive or not supportive. I'm also not saying that if abuse is happening and if she is being gaslit, that that's okay. I'm also not saying that if Ed or Liz somehow triggers something in you and reminds you of something that you went through or are going through, that somehow I am discounting that or saying that that's normal. I'm not. Of course, if you were going through or are going through abuse, that's not okay. You don't deserve that. You deserve to be safe and to not have to be abused, obviously. So I feel like sometimes I have to say that because I think Ed in this relationship is highly triggering to people, which is okay. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.